la
Sí.
cámara?
Gírala un poquitito, un poquitito. Ya, sí, perfecto.
Hello again, Jim. We are happy to have you back here today. How
I'm
are
happy to be here. I'm happy to be anywhere.
you? Yes.
Yesterday we all
I'm
talked.
happy to be alive.
Yes.
It's grateful. Yesterday we were talking with the legendary Jim Salicrup, and
Oh.
today we are running back that.
Yes. Well, yesterday we have him here, but we want to talk with him a little bit more because it's an honor to have you here.
You didn't have enough yesterday.
No, we didn't. We
You're
didn't.
glutton for punishment. You're back for more.
We need it.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
Thanks again, Jim.
Why don't you be talking to her? She's more beautiful than I am. So. Or him. Look how happy he is. And look at that Superman tattoo. Oh my! And Wonder. Oh my
Show
God!
to
the camera.
people.
Yeah.
Yes.
No,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
amazing. Where's Spider-Man? No, it's maybe in a place where we don't want to.
I don't know. I mean, if you want to
Yes,
start with the
well,
questions.
He doesn't shoot webs on.
Yes, yesterday I think we didn't present you like the big you are in the industry. So I want to give like
No. I was just very lucky to be given the opportunities I had. I that's the biggest thing you could know about me is I'm incredibly lucky, and I'm very thankful and have a lot of gratitude. I'm lucky to be here. I'm lucky to be with you guys.
We are lucky. We stay with you. We talk with you. You are a legend,
Oh.
and you are working a lot of comics that we love. So,
yes.
do you want to
Well,
start?
thank you. That's very
Yes.
kind of you.
I want to start with a question. It's a simple one, but
Good, because I can't answer the hard questions.
no. When did you realize you make such classic histories in Marvel? Or
I didn't think of it as me. I think I saw my job as providing the opportunities for all the great writers and artists that I work with to do their work and think of me as someone who wants to help them. I didn't want to be. We all sometimes work for a boss who's like a tyrant, and very strict, and they don't let you be who you are, and particularly in a creative field. Like there are lots of times I would do writing, and I would get assignments, and the editor would tell me, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that, and I'm thinking, well, why don't you write it yourself? What do you need me for? But I wouldn't say that because I want the money, I'd get for writing it, and I try to please the editor. But I thought to myself, I don't want to be that type of editor. If I have the same attitude towards the creators I have towards the characters. When I edit Spider-Man, I want him to be as much like Spider-Man as possible. I don't want him to be a second-rate version of any other character. When I work with the creators, I want them, to be as much who they are as possible. Otherwise, why are you working with them? So if I'm working with Todd McFarlane or Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko, I want them to be who they are. And so I don't think of myself as particularly responsible for how the books came out. They came out good, bad, bless you, all different ways, depending on the creators, how much time we had, the different circumstances. Comic books, are like also a business, and there are deadlines. And if you're a fan and if you like a particular title, and you go to the comic book store and you're looking forward to an issue, you want it to come out on time, and you don't want to see a fill-in, you don't want to, miss issues, or you don't want to read a series where it's a continued story, you got to wait a year for the next part. So a lot of what I have to tell new creators is it's not a matter of making what you're working on perfect, because you'll never finish it. You'll be late. The idea is to do the best you can in the time you have. And, and it'll work out. You got to keep going.
Okay. Let me ask you a question about Torment. In this edition, you write the introduction.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, I
in
wrote it
19
in Spanish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And you say that in your mind, you have like the idea of write 5 or 6 parts Spider-Man stories. So when I read Torment, I have the sense like maybe you want maybe Torment have the opportunity or to have like a second part.
Possibly. I mean, only Todd would know. But I think that the last, if you had asked me back then,
Yes.
a year or so before that came out, would you want to start another Spider-Man comic book? I would have said no. Uh, I thought Spider-Man worked best in just one title, Amazing Spider-Man. And if anything, if Marvel wanted more Spider-Man comics, I thought, well, maybe they should just make Amazing Spider-Man weekly. Like TV shows are weekly. And if you're coming out with one Spider-Man comic every week, why not have it be the same one?
Yes.
And I think Marvel's closer to doing that right now, where it seems like Amazing Spider-Man is coming out. Is it once every 2 weeks? Or
Yes.
yeah, that it's getting closer and closer to what I wanted over 20, 30 years ago. But well, what happens is they're still publishing all these other Spider-Man comics, which I think dilutes it. I mean, things are tough for everyone. Like comic books have become so expensive that you can't buy every single comic book that comes out, and you can't even get every Spider-Man comic book that comes out. So I think, for example, in the last couple of years, they got a very talented writer, J. Mark DeMatteis, to do sort of I don't know whether it was a prequel to Craven's Last Hunt,
Yes,
called Craven's Lost Hunt, and they made it a separate miniseries. And I think it didn't have as much impact as Craven's Last Hunt, because if you were buying Spider-Man comics when Craven's Last Hunt came out, you couldn't avoid it. It was in all 3 Spider-Man comics. You go to the store one week, Craven's Last Hunt. Oh, the next week, still Craven's Last. For 6 weeks, that was the only Spider-Man story going on. And I did that because I wanted, to have impact. And I didn't want Spider-Man to be buried alive one week, and then next week another Spider-Man comes out, another comic book with Spider-Man in it, and everything's okay. And it says, oh, this takes place after Craven's Last Hunt. Oh, well, I know the fans are smart, and they don't really think Spider-Man's going to die, but, don't kill the suspense. And I liked, so I wish Craven's Lost Hunt could have run the same way, being the regular Amazing Spider-Man title, and that they weren't publishing so many other Spider-Man titles, because they're almost like forcing the fans to make a choice, like which Spider-Man comic can I afford to get? And if you're collecting Amazing Spider-Man, you may miss out on some of the other things. So that's my thoughts on this very serious topic.
Okay. And well, during your time editing Spider-Man, what do you think was the riskiest decision you have to make in that time? If you can remember something or anything?
Uh, I went into it having a few opinions. The biggest one, and sometimes I get what I want, and then years later, I find out more information, and I think, oh, well, I didn't know. I could have done it that way. And the biggest example is the black and white costume.
Okay.
as I was saying, I want Spider-Man to be Spider-Man. So I just thought the black and white costume was a reaction to what they called a lot of other characters, like Batman and Daredevil, becoming darker,
Yes.
grim and gritty. And I didn't think Spider-Man was like that. Even though Spider-Man in Craven's Last Hunt, that's probably the darkest Spider-Man story ever, and I wound up being the editor of it. But when I saw the black and white costume, my first impression was, well, that looks like a villain.
Yes.
And so I kept that thought. And when Jim Shooter was the editor in chief, uh, at Marvel, they like to do things like for key issues. Like if a comic reaches like an issue 300, which would be hard to do these days because they keep starting with number ones all over again. But back then, Amazing Spider-Man was getting close to issue 300, and they asked, "What would you like to do?" And my thought is, I asked Jim Shooter, could I go back to the red and blue costume? That would have made me happy. And when I was talking and to his credit, he said, "Well, you're the editor. Okay, we'll do that." And years later, when I was talking to Jim, who unfortunately has passed away recently, but we always had a good relationship, except when he would fire me. But other than that, I didn't hold it against him. But he was a good guy, and I learned a lot from him. So I was talking about the black and white costume, and he told me he wished it could have been around longer, because his plan, what he wanted to do, was keep it around so long that the fans would think, "Oh, that's the permanent costume. Spider-Man's going to have a black." And he said, "And then bring back the red and blue costume."
Okay.
So I said, "Oh, that was great. Why didn't you tell me that? I would have reconsidered." And so, but I didn't know. He didn't tell me. So we went back to the red and blue.
Yes.
And then around the time before we got to issue 300, Jim was no longer the editor-in-chief at Marvel, and Tom DeFalco was promoted to the new editor-in-chief. And he calls me in and asks me, "What are you going to do for the 300 issue?" It's like, this is like deja vu. I already went through this already. So I said, "Oh, we're going to go back to the red and blue costume." And Tom, he's my new boss. He says, "Well, that's not enough." Oh, well,
What you want? What you want?
yeah, that's what I said. What would you like? And he said, "Introduce a new major Spider-Man villain." And I'm thinking, there have been 300 issues of Amazing, and probably a lot of issues Spectacular and Web of Spider-Man and Marvel Team Up, and what you consider the major Spider-Man villains. The majority were created by Stan Lee,
Yes.
John Romita, and Steve Ditko.
Yes.
And even though it was all these other people came along and came up with all sorts of villains, very few of them went on to become what someone would call a major Spider-Man villain. So I'm thinking, like, this is impossible. He's really asking, for a lot, and we've already got issue 300 in the works. So I got together with my assistant at the time, Glenn Herdling, very smart, talented guy, went on to write lots of comics at Marvel. And we're talking it through, and I'm remembering I thought of the black and white costume that looked like a villain. So I thought, well, we're already doing this thing where he's going to change his costume. Why don't we make the black and white costume a real villain?
Yes.
And
Okay.
maybe it's, instead of it, Spider-Man being inside, it's like, or Peter Parker, we get some really big guy, who looks like he could really, beat Spider-Man, make him really scary. I mean, a lot of the Spider-Man villains, even the major ones, they look like old men sometimes. We don't want Spider-Man beating up old guys. Like, have someone really scary go up against him. So I passed. Tom approved the idea, And I spoke to the writer, David Michelini, who had to change course. And he did all what we call the heavy lifting. He brought Eddie Brock, decided to make him Venom, came up with the name Venom. Although in Black Panther, Don McGregor had a villain named Venom with two M's. Spider-Man villain was Venom with just one M. And, he came up with the backstory. He really did a lot of the work. And then when it went to Todd McFarlane to draw, Todd admits he didn't even know there was a human being, because he drew the tongue and the teeth. Eric Larson later on made the tongue longer. So it was because of all that, Venom came about. And the last thing, to be honest, I love it when people think we're brilliant and creative. But when you think about it, Venom is very much just an evil version of Spider-Man. Yes. And in the superhero comics, almost every superhero has gone up against an evil version of themselves. There's a new Superman movie where he has to fight, an evil Superman version of himself. So, but it was just something, who could have predicted how popular it would become? Venom's been in the cartoons and toys. He's had 3 of his own movies. And the only thing I regret is Marvel had a system called new character agreements. Because people would create new characters and then they'd be used for toys or TV and movies, and then the creators wouldn't really get anything, So when they come out with the Venom movies, part of me is thinking, hey, I helped create that character, but it says David Michelini and Todd McFarlane, and that's fine. They did all the real work. But it would have been nice if it just would have said, with Jim Salicrup. I don't even want the money. Just the credit would be nice. So that's why everyone listening now,
yes,
know that I had a hand in the creation of Venom. So it worked out. My boss wanted a major new Spider-Man villain, so I remember asking him later on, so did I deliver? And he said yes.
And when did you realize it will become a classic?
I don't know. It sort of sneaks up on you. I just knew. Even initially when it was popular, you just think, well, at the moment, maybe some other character will come along, and then this will be forgotten. And so now it's over 30 some years, more than that, and Venom is still, he has his own comic. I would have never expected that. So I guess at this point, I'm beginning to realize, I guess there's something to that character. Dr. Octopus, I don't think ever got his own comic book.
I have a question, but it's different from here, because I just thought about it. But how does it work when you have an idea as a Spider-Man editor or the editor-in-chief? The writer pitch an idea to you, or you give the idea to the writer and they work with it, or how do you manage that workflow?
Well, I would have initially thought it would be very difficult. If you're the editor of, say, a less popular character, although they're all so popular now thanks to the movies. But say like Iron Man usually was only published in one title.
Yes.
So a monthly comic, even if it has an annual, that's maybe 13 comic books. Yeah. And if you have a writer, the editor, you're probably not going to run out of ideas. But on Spider-Man, where initially there were 3 titles, then we added Spider-Man, which 4 titles, and there's graphic novels and all this stuff. We need a lot of material, a lot of ideas. So fortunately, the environment I was in was we had a lot of good people. My assistant Glenn Herdling, who I mentioned, later Dan Cuddy, originally Adam Blaustein. They all were creative people themselves, and what I tried to do, which ties into I wish there was only Amazing Spider-Man, was I wanted all the Spider-Man comics to feel like the main one. I didn't want Amazing to be particularly special.
Okay.
I see with the difference between editing Spider-Man and say the mutant titles is there's lots of mutants.
Okay.
You know, so you could have the X-Men, but you could have New Mutants, which are different characters, and you could have Excalibur, different characters. You know, maybe Wolverine appears in a bunch of them. But with Spider-Man, it's all Peter Parker. Or back then, there was only one Spider-Man.
Yeah.
You know, there wasn't Miles Morales
Miles Morales,
and
yeah.
Spider-Woman, Spider-Girl, Spider-Boy. You know, it's like the old Superman comics in a way. But anyway, back then, I just wanted Peter Parker to be the same and Spider-Man to be the same character in each one of his books. And that worked both in terms of the writing and the artwork. In terms of the writing, writers are crucial in that they're the ones writing the voice of all the characters. So I got it down to just two writers. I had David Michelinie, Todd, you count him also. So three writers for four titles. And Jerry Conway, who was like one of the major Spider-Man writers when I was growing up. And whenever I had a chance, I would try to get Stan Lee to script something. And but I tried to keep the amount of creators as a minimal.
Okay.
So like Jerry would certainly know what he was writing in Web, and the web writer would know what was going on in Spectacular.
Okay.
So it was really just the two. Michelinie and Jerry had to talk to each other, and we would occasionally, like once a year or every 6 months, have a Spider-Man meeting in the office where the writers would come in, we all go out to lunch. And what would happen, which was a surprise, is I would have guessed it would be difficult to come up with new ideas all the time. But what would happen is we would have too many ideas. You know, we would think, well, okay, we had the meeting, now we have enough ideas for the next 6 months. I think that first meeting we had enough ideas for 2 years, and maybe there was still more ideas. Because what would happen is like certain things would become bigger than we expected. Like I think it may have been my assistant, I'm not sure, Glenn Herdling, who came up with the idea of taking this other Ditko character, Captain Universe.
Yes.
What if Peter Parker, Spider-Man, got Captain Universe's power? So we had several months where Spider-Man has cosmic powers. He has a cover where he's beating up the Hulk. It's like so. I mean, that's just one example, but there was so many. Each person would contribute so many ideas that we never worried about that. The writers themselves sometimes would call up. I know we were going to do this idea next, but I thought of this, and if it was a great idea, let's do that.
Okay.
So it was easy to coordinate. I just had to call one more writer. Jerry, David has this idea, or David, Jerry came up with this idea.
In this introduction, you say that you act like a guardian of the characters. So, what is the meaning of a guardian? Of keep the.
I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Peter David, great writer, great sense of humor.
Yes.
Unfortunately, he also passed away recently. And I would have liked to continue working with him, but he was very busy. He was like writing for TV and novels, and he's just great writer. This is an example of he wrote something that I had to edit, and it was a good line. It was funny. But I thought, no, Spider-Man wouldn't say that. I'll tell you what it was. Spider-Man finds an abandoned baby in an alley. So, Spider-Man's a responsible guy. What's he going to do? He's going to take the baby and he brings it to a hospital. And, but he's Spider-Man, so he doesn't go in the front door. I think he comes in through a window, and the doctor and the nurse, they see Spider-Man, and he gives him this baby. And one of whether it was the doctor or the nurse, I don't remember, they asked, I thought was a fair question. Is this your baby? I mean, why, like, he's the one giving it to them. And Peter wrote a line was, well, why don't you throw him against the wall and see if it sticks? And I thought, that's funny. But Spider-Man, I don't think, even joking, or Peter Parker would suggest throwing a baby against the wall.
Yes.
So I had to edit that out because in my interpretation of Guardian, it's like knowing how far, like this is who the characters are. A matter of fact, I think in the first collection of Craven's Last Hunt, there was an article in the back that was written by me and my assistant, Glenn Herdling, which sums up a lot of our feelings about Spider-Man and who we think he is. And this is all subjective. Like during the time I'm editing the books, I get to have my say, within the parameters of what the editor-in-chief, if they think I'm going off track, they could reel me in. And then, the next editor, like in my case, it was Danny Fingerhut. And there was an example of a book that Don McGregor originally started writing for me. And then when Danny was the final editor, he made some changes which the writer was unhappy with. But, that's how it goes. It's like I edited my way, Danny has his way, etc. So to each their own.
You want to say last question because we are running out of time.
Okay.
And
Yes, well, I can say like many questions, but I think this is the most important one. But what was the most fun thing for you the fun thing about doing that?
Well, I guess part of me was very competitive, and when I hooked up with Todd McFarlane, he's also has that competitive spirit, and so when we were doing Spider-Man originally, when we started, X-Men was the number one book, and I had worked on X-Men years before, and so it became number one back then. And so I wanted very much, if I'm going to work on this, and I wanted to be not only good, but I wanted to be very successful. And, at that time, Marvel was sort of outselling everything, all the other companies. We outsold DC, everything. So I felt the only thing to compete against is the X-Men.
yes.
So I had a plan where I thought, it might take us 7 years, but we did it in 3 years where we, suddenly the Spider-Man titles were, catching up, and then we surpassed. And the same thing sort of happened in the movies. Like the first X-Men movie came out, it was more successful than people thought. Superheroes no one cares about, but it did really well. And then when the Spider-Man movie came out, it blew everything away. So it's great to see all that happening. And so for me, that was a lot of satisfaction. And so that was probably the most fun when we actually succeeded at, surpassing. Spider-Man number one, I think, sold over 3 million copies, and being at this convention, I think I may have signed probably 1 million of them by now. So there's only 2 million unsigned copies left.
Well,
Jim,
this was Jim Salicrup. We are very grateful to have you here. Thank you.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you both.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Let's see if I could stand up.
Vamos a cortar. Pues muchas gracias.
Gracias a todos, gracias a todos.